Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. My name is Sarah Wilkin. We are going to be discussing decarbonisation of travel and transport today. I'm going to be letting people in as I go along, so bear with me. We are now recording. So let me begin by introducing myself. So my name is Sarah Wilkin. I'm founder and CEO of Fly Green Alliance. Fly Green Alliance have been operating now for 5 years, since 2019. I was fortunate to write a grant with the University of Amsterdam in 2018 to work on sustainable aviation fuel. And we were fortunate to gain that grant at the end of 2018 to develop the market for SAF. I've personally been working on research into renewables aviation SAF for about 7 years now. And we are taking our work forward in various ways. One of the ways is education and awareness building, and that's why we host webinars such as this today. So over the last few months, I've been working across different sectors because all sectors travel. So it is almost a common denominator. So along that way, I've been kind of understanding and seeing the conversations across different sectors within sustainability, and also seeing quite a few knowledge gaps or areas to work on. So as this is our key area, I've really thought it would be helpful and useful to not only show our knowledge base, but also to support those that are kind of just starting their sustainability work within their organisations. So feel free, we will send this report out as a follow-up to the meeting. It's called offsetting, insetting and book and claim. These are topics that are classically intertwined, but also can get a little complex, and we'll get into that later. So today we'll mostly be covering themes such as this. And so actually what I did pick up from the events is there's quite a lot of misconceptions on certain topics, and the press has been involved heavily with things like offsets, the offsets conversation. So we'll be discussing some misconceptions, but also giving some factual information. We'll be discussing the mechanisms of offsets, and also which involve value chain and net zero conversations, and I'll be discussing the market making. So that is really a big part of our work. And we have been all over really. So in the last few years, I've spoken at actually probably more than 45 lunchtime webinars. I've been to lots of different conferences, recently spoken at the World Nuclear Association and the International Energy Atomic Association this year. So there's lots of, so just so much opportunity to gather knowledge and information and access over those years. And so we've been doing that on a not-for-profit basis and really sharing the information we've been gaining. So what we realise is that this is useful and supportive for other businesses. So we've been putting this all into one place. So with the Knowledge Hub, and we've been creating these market intelligence reports, which is combined intel. So these are various pieces of work we've been doing, and of course the webinars such as today, and then we have access to experts and academics then going on to having our role, which is a matchmaking role. So as I mentioned, there is not-for-profit work, and we spoke at the UN recently and worked with 60 students and getting in front of hundreds of thousands of business travellers to make decisions around decarbonisation. On the other hand, we also work with business travellers, travel and transport providers, and travel managers. And we are helping them with strategy, net zero, science-based targets. We are giving them business intros, advisory, mechanism discussions, and all the information they need to make decisions around the decarbonisation of travel and transport. because of this network building and knowledge, technical knowledge, we're also able to offer solutions, be in the data. So my background is also data and digital. So we can look at platforms and we can do that kind of vetting and trust to also help our members and clients be matched with the right solutions. So these are a few of our functions. And yeah, the bottom line is, because we do this, we save you time and money and carbon. So what I want to show you as well is one project that we have worked on, is that over summer the European Commission put a grant out on the subject of policies and governance shaping the future transport and mobility systems. So this is absolutely our area. So we brought a group of 9 partners together and an expert committee of 20, including some of the biggest fuel producers globally, some of the biggest transport providers, new fuels such as nuclear. And we brought all of that into a 50-page proposal. We were the coordinator. We have gained support from Innovate UK to do that. They have encouraged us to do that for the UK. Because the UK has been out of the Horizon programme for a while. So that is really, it's been a great way to get the UK closer to Europe. And if we manage to secure that grant, we will gain 3 million across the group to execute that plan. And we'll find out in January 25. So we're very excited about that because it's very interesting work. Now that work for that proposal, as well as our own work, is across not just SAF now, which people know us for, but we're also working across biodiesel, because once you are knowing the production and detail of SAF, it's very close to the feedstock of biodiesel. Biodiesel often turns into SAF as a next step, and it's sharing the same supply chain. So we are also supporting development of different fuels, such as biodiesel, as well as e-fuels. So e-fuels, if you know some about e-fuels, that it's CO2 and hydrogen-based fuels and synthetic fuels. We are now also working on nuclear for the supply chain and energy that can be used in e-fuels for the future. So this is our mix. And as mentioned, I'd spoken at the World Nuclear Association alongside Google and Dow Chemical. There are now commitments from Google and Microsoft and Dow to decarbonize their supply chains through nuclear. So what I want to let you know about today and what we will focus on is heavy transport. So if we look at this European Commission chart, we can work out that approximately 60% of the EU transport emissions is from heavy transport, and that's aviation, shipping, trucking, and rail. And that's what we will concentrate on today. And we won't be concentrating on cars, just to let you know, because as you will all know, EV and batteries is another topic, but also we know that it is likely to go towards battery and EV because of the size of the engines, as well as the distances they are going. The transport we are discussing is really going to be using liquid fuels for a long time in the future, because literally of the size of the engines and the long haul aspects. So we know also that certain orders have been put in, and that, for example, an order will be dispatched. We know that an order of an aircraft will be dispatched in 2033. So those aircrafts are likely to be used up to 2060 at least. So aircrafts and ships are used for approximately 20-30 years. So this is the time frame that we are looking at. And so there is a lot of work to do, and that market will be around for some time. And this is the transition fuel market. So another project we did do is support the Norwegian Armed Forces. and then Norwegian Airlines to disseminate their SAF mechanism, the way they have put their contract and project together. It is a Scope 1 and Scope 3 commitment. And if you want to know about this one, please ask me, because we've got a whole separate webinar on this one. But I wanted to mention it today because this leads us on to the fact that what we are talking about are voluntary commitments. So what the Norwegian case study, as well as others, are voluntary commitments to decarbonisation. It means it's not regulatory, it's not mandated. So what we are talking about when we're talking about voluntary is science-based targets. We're talking about buyers' alliances. By our name alone, Fly Green Alliance, we are creating this, what's the word? We are creating this, the need for aggregation. So really, we are an aggregation platform, and this is what we have been doing over these 5-7 years. It's aggregating our network and commitment. So what we do believe, and what we know now from detailed conversations with banks, investors, fuel suppliers, is that two makes the supply. It's quite often said as chicken and egg, quite often said there's not enough supply of renewable fuels. Now, if we can aggregate that demand, what a bank needs to know is that they're essentially going to get paid back. If we can aggregate demand and do such as Microsoft has done, a 20-year offtake of certain electricity. Now that's a PPA, power purchase agreement. If you can aggregate those power purchase agreements or offtakes for SAF or biofuels, for example, then we can essentially take that to the investors to ensure that that supply. What we're working towards is a balance of this, so that we have the demand, but then we also have the supply. So it not only balances out the literal product of that, but it also balances out carbon, making it eventually a net zero. So this is what we're working towards and discussing today. So on regulatory, we have Valerio on the call today, on the webinar today, who is speaking on behalf of Squire Patton Boggs. He is an associate lawyer focusing on ESG and transport. So Valerio, would you like to introduce yourself as I switch the slides?
Yeah, sure. So hello, Sarah. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation, first of all. I'm Valerio Giovannini. I'm a lawyer in the international law firm Squire Patton Boggs. And in my role, I advise clients, especially on environmental law and ESG obligations. And that will be the topic of today's presentation. What I will do today in this presentation, I will touch upon some of the laws that can be put under the umbrella of the ESG. So I will start with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive and Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. These two are often taken like let's say the milestone, not the milestones, but the main components of the ESG area. And then I will focus also on greenwashing, talking about empowering consumer in the Green Transition Directive, which has recently modified the Unfair Commercial Practice Directive. And on this matter, I will specifically focus on greenwashing practices related to carbon offsetting. If we go to the next slide, before going into the details, this is more of a generic overview. Apologize for the intense wording in the slide, but it contains useful information related to why the European Union is legislating on ESG. So as we all know in this call, as of 2019, the EU launched the Green Deal, which is a political framework, and under this political framework started legislating intensively on environmental matters. And this resulted and is resulting in obligations for companies in the EU, but also outside the European Union. So under the framework of under these ESG obligations, we find different legal frameworks, the ones that I mentioned before, but also others related, for example, carbon emissions. I'm thinking of the introduction of the CBAM mechanism, or also the EU deforestation regulation. As we speak, there are intense discussions at European level for the postponement of this regulation because it's creating problems for for the industry, or might create problems, let's say, or in terms of compliance for many industries in the EU, and especially in this case outside the European Union. And what I also would like to stress in the introduction is that the EU for the next mandate does not intend to disinvest in the European Green Deal. We have heard, because the Commission President von der Leyen also expressly said that there will be a focus on the competitiveness of the industry, but at the same time, she said that European Green Deal, it is a priority and will be a priority also for the next mandate. And if we go to the next slide, starting with the two laws that I mentioned before, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, we often hear this acronym, but just to clarify what it is. So what is the European Union wants with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive is mandating companies to report on sustainability, meaning that the companies will be obliged to report on what they're doing in terms of sustainability, but also on the impact that the company has on those matters. And why that? Because financial investors will have the possibility to look into not only the financial data of a company, but also about the sustainability considerations for deciding whether to invest or not on a company. That is the main scope. And we have been advising different clients about this piece of legislation initially in relation to the application, to the scope of application on the company. Multinational companies have very wide corporate structure, so they wanted to understand which were the subsidiaries and the branch that would fall under the scope. And as you can see on the expected impact, many companies will be impacted by this law as of 2024 in case of public traded companies, and then afterwards. But the message to be delivered here is that companies in scope should start already preparing compliance, because the directive, as a directive, will have to be transposed into the national legal systems of member states. And member states have already started or are completing this transposition into the national legal system, and now those obligations will kick in. So it's a crucial moment where to start looking at the also national laws related to, if not done yet, related to the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. And that's, of course, an activity on which we are extensively focusing as a law firm. I
just ask one question there, Valerio. So CSRD started to come into legislation last year, but this year is a key year, isn't it?
Yeah, that's an important point. So the deadline for the transposition into national legal systems was July 2024. So now there are national laws, and those are the laws that companies based in the different countries will have to look into, because, you know, being a directive, it is only a framework that then will have to be put in place in the different EU member states. So if I'm a company based in France, I will have to look into the French legislation transposing the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive to make sure that I comply with the law. So that's an important point. This year, some companies, most of the companies, the ones that they're not publicly traded, will have to report as of the financial year 2025. But of course, this is an assessment to be done on a case-by-case cases. So you have a general indication on the slide, but the legal assessment obviously has to be done on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, and just to do a link between why are we talking about CSRD, because as you have said, it is really the precursor to making any net zero. Well, this is my interpretation. It is precursor to making sure the data is transparent, reported, which then leads on to, as we are going to discuss, the due diligence directive, which is actively encouraging net zero transition. So I just want to put these two together, and of course, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to just make these.
No problem. No problem. No. That's please feel free to jump in. And this is also an important point that because it relates to what the point I wanted to make is that what is the difference between these two legal frameworks? That one is about reporting, as we said, but this other one is about taking action also. Because with the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, companies will be mandated to intervene on due diligence policies. So they will have to update their current policies and make them consistent and compliant with international standards and international conventions. And also they will have to establish and maintain a compliant procedure to ensure that subjects affected by the company's activities have remedy measures in place. So the difference between these two legal frameworks, they are connected because with the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, companies will have to implement a plan to reduce carbon emissions, and this has to be reported under the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So of course they are interconnected, but the main difference is that the reporting directive is about reporting activities, while the Sustainability Due Diligence Directive is also about making an effort, make concrete actions on different levels. Of course, we don't have time now to go under the
we will summarize, but yeah, and you were mentioning the due diligence. We discussed that. What year will the due diligence directive come into basically regulation?
So here we are same like the previous case. It's a directive, so member states have until July 2026 to transpose the directive into national legal systems, and first obligations for companies in scope is as of 2027. But we have also clients already asking us how to comply with the law because they are preparing compliance. It's a very complex legal framework. So we are already advising how to prepare regulatory compliance, and my suggestion is to do so if your company is in scope, because that's a difficult exercise.
Yeah, exactly. So then to connect it also to my introduction, so as we said, there's the voluntary side. So everything up to, so for the due diligence directive, everything up to 2027 is still voluntary, but after 27, making a plan is no longer voluntary. So we're working on net zero from both sides. The EU democratically bringing in legislation. So organisations such as Fly Green Alliance, Science-Based Targets, Buyers Alliances are all working on this too. So we're coming together from different angles, but just to kind of clarify that. Thank you, Valerio.
And yeah, so we going to the next slide. So I will address also the greenwashing area. So as I mentioned before, talking about the Unfair Commercial Practice Directive, the main element of novelty in this case is that making an generic environmental claim will be considered under this legal framework as a misleading practice. What are generic environmental claims? This product is 100% carbon free, or this product is environmental friendly. You will not be in the position of doing so. I mean, you will be, but this will be considered misleading practice if this claim is not substantiated by scientific evidence, or if this claim is not related to a European standard or European certification. So that's the main element of novelty. But another element of the law, which will be of interest to our discussion today, is that the law is, among the misleading practices, has also included carbon offsetting. But if we go to the next slide, there is also a point to make in relation to carbon offsetting. So carbon offsetting are considered to be misleading in case the carbon offsetting mentioned is not linked to the product life cycle, meaning that if you are offsetting carbon emissions in the production of the product and you are claiming the product is carbon free, or that as involved carbon offset, this would be allowed. But if you are promoting a service or a product to a consumer, because it's a business to consumer relation that is at stake. In that case, if you're doing so because you are investing in a reforestation project in the Amazon, and you are claiming that your product is less impactful for the environment than another one, this would be considered as a misleading practice. And that's precisely the case which we will analyze in a minute. That is the subject of a ruling of a Dutch court that involves an airline company. So then we will see. So if you want to claim that your product is environmental sustainable more than others, and it involves carbon offsetting, this has to relate to the product life cycle. Then if you go to the next slide, Also, to clarify is that the European Union is not prohibiting companies to promote their environmental practices, also involving carbon offsetting. This is something that you can do, of course, but if you are deciding to do so, this has to be done in a transparent manner. So if you are investing in reforestation projects, of course you can promote this, but you can't claim that the product is less impactful for the environment because you are investing in an environmental project. So that's, to simplify, that's the intention of the EU legislator. And if we move ahead, I can give you more concrete examples of greenwashing in aviation. So we don't have yet cases decided by the European Court of Justice on greenwashing, but we do have many cases at the national level. This is an example of a ruling of the Dutch court, and it's interesting because it relates to aviation. So an airline company was selling flight tickets, claiming that the flight would be less impactful for the environment because of carbon offsetting projects, which were not related to the flight itself. And for the reasons I explained, the court found this practice to be misleading. And from a legal perspective, it's a very interesting case also because this ruling was decided before the implementation of the new legal framework. So this is to say that if you intend to use like an environmental claim based on this type of carbon offsetting, you have a risk. You had a risk before, but now the risk is increased because now there is a legal framework which is listing this practice as misleading. So we also expect litigation activities to increase in that regard. And if we move to the next slide, this will be my last point. I also wanted to bring to your attention that the European Commission is investigating 20 airlines for claims that might be considered as misleading if the airlines will not provide the European Commission with substantiation, with scientific evidence of the claims that were made by those airlines. And in this regard, you should also consider that the European Union is working on another directive, the European Green Claims Directive, which will detail how a company will be able to substantiate the claims. What are the procedure? What is the verification to be made, and so on. So this is a very important piece of legislation as well. So this was my last slide. In case you have questions on this, or in general, if you have questions on the EU regulatory topics, of course, we are open to answer and to have interactions with you. You find my contact details in the next slide. And over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you, Valerio. It's very valuable to have these insights clearly discussed. It is a topic, and I know, Amy, you have asked a question about insets. As we are now leading on to discussing offsets and nature-based solutions with Lorenzo, I'd like to come back to your question afterwards, if that's okay. And because we are going to be discussing the relationship between these topics, and this is why I've also invited Lorenzo today from EarthLib to respond to the new legislation, but also to EarthLib's position and also their thoughts on the new directives, but also we are able to think about insets and how also offsets relate to or are part of CORSIA. So I'll hand over to Lorenzo now. If you want to address kind of what Valerio has mentioned about offsetting is not allowed currently, because there's been a lot of discussion, and then if you could then introduce EarthLib as well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, super. Lovely to meet everybody. And yeah, I think on Valerio's points, I think it's incredibly important that the regulations exist. I think in the past, consumers had been tricked, and so I think this evolution is going to strengthen the market. I think our number one consideration at EarthLib is that, we really want to support nature-based solutions because they can have a large impact, and I'll touch on that. But we do need to have guardrails. But one of the importance is that we recognize how crucial nature-based solutions are in achieving our Paris Agreement goals. And so making regulation as smooth and clear, but also ensuring that companies that want to be responsible can assist us in our pathway to net zero and reaching our climate goals. That's going to be really important. And so why does Earthly exist? You know, we're here to really help companies to support leading nature-based solutions. And if you go to the next slide, you know, our ambition is to help protect and restore at least 1% of the planet by 2030. And one of the things that we saw when we started the business was that there was really a lack of trust and engagement when it comes to nature-based solutions. I think it all exploded with a Guardian article, which we'll touch on. But our ambition is to help to protect and restore these nature-based solutions, which are critical, and to help businesses really move past a compliance position to a leadership position where they can really help to gain, you know, help us to achieve our Paris Agreement goals. I think a lot of the founders and the businesses that we speak to do want to have a positive impact. And how do they do that? Obviously with regulation in mind and ensuring that they take responsibility for their actions as well. If we go on to the next slide. So firstly, I think what, you know, we want to break down for those maybe not aware, what are nature-based solutions? So nature-based solutions are actions that protect, restore, and sustainably manage natural ecosystems that address environmental challenges such as climate change, biodiversity loss, and water management. I think what we're starting to see is that, you know, we've been very carbon focused for a long time. 1 second, I just got my dog.
Oh, good.
Unfortunate nature of working from home.
Real nature.
The key is that we've been very carbon focused, but in a sense, the carbon worlds that we've been operating in have led us to create systems that don't fully review the positive impacts that nature-based solutions can have. And so that is just having that carbon tunnel vision has led us to not look at the positive impacts that local communities can have from biodiversity, from nature-based solutions, or how do we actually activate good nature-based solutions. And I think these are now starting to change. In the UK, we now have a compliance market for the biodiversity for those in the built environment. So these are things that are really building. But most of all, businesses are starting to understand the impacts that nature can have. If we don't look after nature, we're going to have supply chain shocks, and that could greatly damage revenues and profits in the future. So if we go to the next slide, nature-based solutions. Why do we want to focus on them? They're incredibly important. I think recent research shows that it can support at least 1/3 of the climate mitigation that we need to hit Paris Agreement goals. And as we all know, the world is getting hotter. 2024 is the hottest year on record. We really need to try to support all the tools that we have, and nature-based solutions are one of those tools. Sadly, when we started the business, nature-based solutions received only about 3% of climate mitigation funding. To date, I think in 2022, it was around 200 billion, but we need to be really investing in these solutions if we can get their support to achieve our goals. And that's around 500 billion by 2030 and 700 billion by 2050. So, a lot is needed, but we should look at these opportunities within nature-based solutions as not just carbon solutions. If we move to the next slide. Nature-based solutions are fundamentally, what we derive a lot of value from. A recent UBS study noted that 60% of global GDP is either moderately or highly dependent on ecosystems. And so if you're thinking about the clothes you're wearing, the food you're eating, if we don't look after these ecosystems, we can really damage not only our GDP, our global GDP, but put ourselves in a really tricky position for life on Earth. And I think one of the things that we are seeing in the sense of the perverse incentives is that some of our governments are still supporting fossil fuel companies. I think a recent study said that about 7 trillion is still being invested globally to support activities within the fossil fuels industries. And so, we've got to start to realign, not only as businesses, but also as governments to our Paris Agreement goals. And I think when we look at some countries, we do see sort of landmark bills. In the UK, again, really strengthening the understanding. And I think now there's around 90 countries that have signed up to protecting and restoring 30% of their land and sea by 2030. We may not hit these goals, but these goals are out there because people are starting to respect and understand the impact that nature can have. If we go to the next slide, please. But there has been a lot of issues, and I think this is one of the things that Valerio was pointing to. People that were not using offsets or nature-based solutions in the right way, often covering up or making false claims. And I think we also have to respect that the voluntary carbon market in itself has been quite new. It's often seen as an unregulated market. What I'd like to say is that the banks were also regulated, but caused a huge problem in 2008. But the market is developing. I think one of the things that we saw when we started Earthly is that we saw a lot of these problems. There was projects that weren't delivering on their promises, whether they were over-crediting or there was leakage, there was some technical issues. And so for us, it's really important that we continue to strengthen the voluntary market. And there's been some key systems that have been delivered now to help protect that market. One is the core carbon principles, which is now all projects are meant to be delivering on key outlines that are the permanence, the leakage, the additionality. And so we're strengthening the market, and it has been strengthened a lot over the recent years. But that's also why people like Earthly, people like B0, who are carbon rating agencies, exist to help businesses to understand where quality lies and what projects they can support to deliver on positive outcomes for carbon, for people, and for biodiversity. If we go to the next slide, please. And these are some of the things that Valerio is touching on. We've seen a lot of greenwashing scandals. We've seen businesses using and operating within the voluntary carbon market in the wrong way and tricking customers really fundamentally. But this is also, something that we at Earthly see as something that could damage investment that we need to nature-based solutions. We see two dangers. One is greenwashing could cause a huge danger to the investments that are required in nature-based solutions, but so is green hushing, where we are afraid to talk about what we do to positively support nature-based solutions. So we need to make supporting nature-based solutions easy and effective, right? And we have to ensure, and that's why the guardrails from the EU will be supportive of this, is so that if we can follow these guardrails, businesses can enact true change by investing in solutions and making sure that they're using those and claiming things in the right way. And I think the European Union itself doesn't want to detract money from people who want to support nature-based solutions or renewable energy, but they want it to be done in the right way. And so if we go to the next slide, please. So for us, we wanted to bring trust to the market. And so what we felt is that nature-based solutions had been very carbon focused, but true nature-based solutions can deliver on more than carbon. They should be delivering on social impact and biodiversity impact. And so we look at 106 different data points and score our projects on a level of confidence. The more third-party confidence we have, the higher the level of the score. And so we're using lots of different tools and ensuring that the projects that we work with and our clients support are delivering on maximizing the impact that nature-based solutions can have. And I think what I would say is that a lot of the carbon market in the past had only focused on the carbon pillar. And that meant that we were delivering possibly monoculture crops of eucalyptus on land where indigenous people had been kicked off. So these aren't good projects. What we want and what we need is projects that work with their local community and are helping to bring back and secure biodiversity in the right way. We go to the next slide, please. And these are all the different data points that we bring in. So geospatial information, third-party carbon rating agency information, as well as our own. We use bioacoustics and MRV and cool new technology such as eDNA. And some of these technologies hadn't been used in the past and hadn't been asked by the methodologies to be used. And so we really want to be as tech-focused as possible. But we also have a lot of third-party validated information from people who are analyzing the projects themselves. So, that's a lot of data that we analyze. If we go to the next slide, please. Conscious of time, so. And this is what it looks like in terms of supporting a project. So this is an amazing project in Ethiopia that we supported. It had a high carbon score, biodiversity, and people score. But this project was really working hand in hand with the community to deliver on a reforestation project that could help them not only with species that could give them a livelihood, but also sequester carbon over time. And so our clients can look at these projects and say, okay, we particularly like the values that this project delivers on. So the help to the communities, the carbon, the biodiversity, and we want to support this exact project. And that's how we operate, is trying to help businesses to support leading projects, ensuring that they can be proud of that work, but also ensuring that they're saying the right thing and they're not, to Valerio's point, greenwashing, but they're having a contribution to achieve our global goals. So that's my last slide, but welcome to take questions.
Thank you. So thank you, Lorenzo. And just actually, Amy has asked a question. So we are talking about, so both of you have mentioned value chains or supply chains. And just to come to that point, obviously, Valerio, you mentioned what can be allowed as if it is within your own supply chain. So then is that, would we prefer to call, I'm not sure if you want to take this or Lorenzo, but would we prefer to call insetting in that situation? So Lorenzo, you're on mute.
Sorry. So insetting is really within the value chain of the product. And so that's the key here. And I think one of the elements that Valerio is pointing out is that if you're making a carbon neutral claim, it should be the reductions within the value chain of that product. If you're using offsets to make that claim, that's not possible.
Yeah.
But what we can do, if people want to have a positive impact, is say that you're contributing to a positive impact. And so I think this is the language, and this is the issue, is how do we ensure that we can have a positive impact, but also, and the key is everyone should be reducing emissions in line with the science-based targets, but you can have a positive impact as well. But we have to make sure about the claim that you're making.
Yeah, and then with regards to CORSIA, because CORSIA is allowing different offsets, so this is kind of how you, many might not realize how Earthly sits within travel and transport, but you mentioned, Lorenzo, that you work with logistics companies, you've got 700 clients that work with you. Many are within transport, and also CORSIA allows, so there's been a recent update on CORSIA. Would you just like to comment on that one?
Yeah, so CORSIA...
Valerio, I'll come to you in a minute. Thank you.
CORSIA has objectives to utilize offsets for a period of time to start to have a positive impact whilst airlines are decarbonizing. And so what that comes from is the idea that we need investment to scale these solutions, whether that nature-based solutions or SAF solutions. And so this is how we can do this. And so when it comes to nature-based solutions, recently there was a new approval by CORSIA to enable some of the biggest methodologies, which are Vera, Gold Standard, and CAR, to be allowed for this offsetting. And Earthly operates a lot with these type of registries, Vera, the Carbon Action Reserve, and we have some amazing projects within those registries. And so we're happy to see that CORSIA can now support these projects. And they need a lot of investment, because if we're looking at the scale of what these airlines have to do, there isn't enough credits in the market, and so we need this investment early to start to support these projects.
And sorry, I should say, if you're not aware of it, CORSIA is the International Civil Aviation Organization's mechanism to reduce carbon within the aviation industry, and it is the carbon offsetting and reduction scheme, essentially. Valerio, you have...
I just wanted to clarify on the question on the chat that what they're discussing with the legal framework I mentioned is the relationship between business to consumer. So it's when a company is advertising a product or a service to be sold to consumers. So that's the frame where it goes, and that's where value chain as a relevant. So in case of insetting or in case it's related to the value chain, that would be, of course, allowed. But it's B2C relations. That's a very important point to make.
Yeah, thank you. So coming on to another part of the supply chain. So we're kind of discussing things from different angles today. So I would like to introduce you to Anna-Maria, who is B100's expert in B100 at Cargill. B100 is a biodiesel. It is another part of decarbonize. It's another way to decarbonize the supply chain. So I would like to hand over to Anna-Maria to explain more about the technicalities of B100, what it is, where it is, and how it can support decarbonization.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Thanks for inviting me and also giving me the opportunity to speak today. So, yeah, my name is Anna-Maria Koch, and I work for Cargill as a biofuels business developer. And I'm here today to explain how B100 can play a role in decarbonizing travel and transport. And I'm going to start with explaining the terminology a bit, because that can sometimes be a bit confusing. So if you move to the next slide, Sarah. Yeah, so in fact, biofuels are all kind of liquid fuels which can come from renewable sources or molecules of biological origin. And there are types of biofuels which replace diesel, and those are typically HVO and biodiesel. And both HVO as well as biodiesel can be made from the very same feedstock or raw material. So they can either be made from vegetable oils or be made from waste oils. But the process to produce them actually is a different one. So for HVO, it's a hydrotreatment of oils and fats, whereas for biodiesel, it's a transesterification process of oils and fats. And both, actually, HVO and biodiesel, both can be or are also called drop-in fuels. So both can be directly used in diesel engines. But here HVO is a bit easier to use, so it's compatible with most engines, whereas biodiesel sometimes is not. But biodiesel has the main advantage that its production process is less cost intensive, so it is in fact a cheaper product from a production process perspective, but also from a market perspective, biodiesel is a bit favorable because it has no direct application in the aviation industry. You also might sometimes come across the name FAME. FAME is actually the abbreviation for fatty acid methyl ester, which is just the chemical name for biodiesel. And sometimes it's also referred to as B100, and that the 100 indicates that it's basically 100% bio-based and that there's no fossil component in the blend, so that it's a pure biodiesel, not with fossil components. If we now look at the right side of the slide, we see Cargill's production setup in Europe. Cargill is also active, of course, in the biofuel sector in other regions of the world, but today I'm gonna focus more on Europe. So Cargill is producing biodiesel and is active in the distribution of HVO in Europe. The production facilities are at two locations, in Frankfurt in Germany and in Ghent in Belgium. And Cargill produces both first and second generation biodiesel is sorry, maybe I was on for a second.
Yeah, we lost you for a little bit, but you're back.
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying that Cargill produces first and second generation biodiesel, and explaining that first generation biodiesel is biodiesel made from vegetable oils, so mostly rapeseed oils. And second generation biodiesel then, on the other hand, is biodiesel from waste streams. So you can think about used cooking oil or fatty acids and waste material. Yeah, Cargill has, apart from the production facilities, of course, a distribution network in Europe with storage terminals and logistics set up in multiple countries all over Europe. So it's readily available. Yeah, if we now move to the next slide, I'm gonna explain where B100 can be used directly. So biodiesel is a replacement, or can be a replacement for or substitute for fossil diesel, meaning it can be used in diesel engines. And Cargill Bio100 here is the commercial name for the in-house developed B100. And it can be used, for example, in the trucking sector. For the trucking sector, of course, not all transport companies are yet happy to move to electric vehicles, just due to the reason that an electric truck requires, of course, a huge investment. It's about or up to 3 times more expensive than a diesel truck or a biodiesel truck. And on top of that, you have, of course, the infrastructure that you don't have today in every country in Europe, that the charging infrastructure is equally well developed. And on top of that, you have, of course, the reach. With an electric vehicle, you cannot reach as far as with a diesel truck. And here, biodiesel is a easier solution, where you can use the existing engine and just switch the fuel, and with that directly then reduce emissions. Secondly, the second circle here is the rail sector. Of course, rail is already regarded to be a quite green mode of transport. And also there we have works ongoing in the direction of electrifying the rail sector. But still there are a lot of diesel logs running today in Europe. And here also biodiesel can be used as an alternative fuel to reduce emissions. And then thirdly, of course, the shipping sector. And this includes the inland navigation sector, so barges, but also on top ocean transport and container ships that can be decarbonized with biofuels. And then lastly, and here coming back also to the travel aspect, passengers transport, so buses, for example, with all the, it's basically the same story as for trucks. Electric buses are way more expensive. You have the charging infrastructure, which is not yet developed. So biodiesel is also here a possible solution to directly reduce emissions of transport and travel. Now looking at what are the benefits or key benefits to use biodiesel. Firstly, by switching the fuel from fossil diesel to biodiesel, companies can directly reduce their emissions. So by switching the fuel type, you achieve a reduction of 60 to 90% of greenhouse gas savings. How much actually will be achieved depends on the feedstock type, so the raw material the biofuel is made out of. So if it's made out of waste streams or made out of vegetable oils. And those emission reductions come more from the upstream emissions reduction savings than from the savings at the exhaust pipe, so more from the production of the fuel. And not only CO2 emissions are actually reduced, but also other pollutants, for example, the fine particles or sulfur. oxides.
We just lost you.
It's already today,
Yes.
yes. So I was saying, but the second benefit is, of course, that machines and engines are compatible already today. And thirdly, in Europe, there's a European regulation for biofuels. It's the Renewable Energy Directive, as well as the Fuel Quality Directive. So it's all regulated in Europe, and biofuels are certified and verified very strictly. And lastly, biofuels today have already a proven track record in many different industries. It's a solution which is developed already today and readily available, which is not the case for other solutions. Yeah, and we can go to the next slide to quickly show you some application examples of Cargill Bio 100. One is in the rail sector, where Cargill has performed a trial together jointly with Linneas, rail freight company that wanted to decarbonize their diesel logs. The trial is completed now, completed successfully. And secondly, also the road market, a very big developed market in France as well as in Sweden, because there's friendly regulation which makes the use of biodiesel relatively cheap. And here, especially in France, Cargill is already a supplier of biodiesel to many transport companies since for 2 years. But it doesn't stop here. Also, beyond those applications, Cargill works on decarbonization project in the maritime sector, but even beyond the transport sector, also in power generation markets. Yes, and with that, I would like to conclude that biodiesel, so to say, can be a solution in the transition to carbon reductions, but it's maybe not the one solution, but part of the solution. And it's most importantly a solution that is already available today, and which is not the case yet for other types of propulsions. Biodiesel can still be used in the combustion engines which are existing today. And that with that I would like to thank you, and I'm happy to answer, of course, questions if there are any.
Thank you, Maria. So quite often there is much more biodiesel available globally than there is usually sustainable aviation fuel at this point. So as we mentioned, we are looking at heavy transport in general. So with regards to transition, absolutely biodiesels are part of that from a regulatory point of view, and from also it can be a voluntary perspective as well. So if anyone's got any questions, please feel free to drop them in or come off. I know we've got 1 minute, but in case anybody has any, then please do so. If not, I would like to introduce, we've got a new program coming online next year called In the Loop. So we have been, as we mentioned, we've been community building, network building. We've been doing a lot of not-for-profit information sharing, knowledge sharing, and we really want to grow our community and to be able to do that dissemination. So we have put together a new program so that it will be a monthly update where it's a kind of quick fire update, grants or grant applications, events, speaker opportunities, networking, requests for skills, or interns. All sorts of news stories are going to be. So if you're interested in that, please sign up on the links that are being posted, and we'll follow up with this as well. Thank you, Tom, and to everybody that's joined today. We know it's a busy time for conferences, so appreciate people that have logged in. We will follow up with the report that we mentioned, which discusses all of the topics today, including B100, earthly, nature-based solutions, CSRD, greenwashing, and everything. So thank you very much to the speakers that have joined today, and we'll be in touch soon. So have a very good weekend, And thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.